Hello, everyone. How are you doing? And yes, today we have another scary story that I've found. Get comfortable, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's go. I'm not sure why, in light of everything that had happened, I decided to make it public. Perhaps guilt tipped the scales in my mind, or perhaps I finally found a firmness of character. I thought I was doing something good, or at least the lesser of two evils. These days, I just don't know. What you're about to read will sound like me berating my wife for having a different point of view. All these short passages will make me seem crazy and the retelling of this event will be incoherent, but I guarantee you that there is a method to my madness. What I sow for you here will sprout into what my wife has become. I'm sorry if anyone reading this is related to this or is a victim. However, you don't want my apology. You want to know why. The why is right here. Our wedding night began with a question that seemed so out of place in the splendor of our joyous celebration that I initially took it as a joke. I couldn't help but chuckle lightly. She didn't laugh, not even a smirk. The expression on her face was as blank as a mannequin. She was clearly serious. Something seemed to change in the air around her. The stranger danger warning that most of us imprinted in our brains as soon as we were old enough to talk and walk sounded like a little siren in my head. It was as if the woman I'd dated for 5 years and happily married, as if the woman I was lying in bed with and looking at fondly was a stranger. I pushed the worry to the back of my mind, as it didn't make sense at the time. Sophia, a stranger? Maybe I really had too much champagne. She simply repeated the question. Will you be able to sleep outside the house on the third Sunday of the month? I was instantly sobered by the change in tone. Thinking about how odd such a request was, I straightened up in bed. Did she even realize how complicated the question she'd asked was? She graduated top of her class from Purdue, so of course she understood. No doubt she misunderstood because she didn't, which is why it bothered me. The question is as simple as a sunny day. The question to her question flashed through my mind. Why? That question never left my mind. Instead, I said, of course, dear. She got out of bed, threw a silk robe over her pale, freckled figure, and stepped into the slippers that were waiting for her on the plush carpet of our hotel room. She must have thought I was still playing a joke on her. She walked into the dim light of the candle in the center of the room. She tucked her dark midnight hair, which seemed to absorb what little light was present. Her ethereal beauty was only found in fairy tales, but here she was living as my wife. I need you to promise, she declared. We had dates every night. We were glued to each other when we weren't working, and we had no arguments or conflicts for the first month of marriage. We were finishing each other's sentences for goodness sake. Lord forgive me, but the sex was and still is fantastic. We had almost no problems. Almost. It was the early evening of June 16th, Father's Day, and I have to admit, the third Sunday of the month. We had just gotten back from dinner with my parents. It had been an incredible day, and I had never seen my wife smile so broadly. Everything changed when we got home. A voice shouted, "What are you doing?" Behind me, just as I dropped my keys on the counter. I flinched a little because I didn't recognize the voice at first. It was firm and quite loud. When I looked over my shoulder, I saw my wife standing in the dark archway leading into our living room. Her face was hidden by her long dark hair, leaving only a menacing figure in black in front of me. Even the yellow sundress she wore didn't seem so dazzling in the shadows. A single sharp grey eye peered out from behind her hair. "God, baby, turn on a light or two," I said with a hesitant laugh as I approached the wall switch next to her. Her gaze followed me as I moved like a predator stalking its prey. The living room filled with light, transforming the dark figure back into my adoring wife. I noticed that her hair was now combed and tucked behind her ears, unlike how I had seen it in the dark. I attributed it to fatigue and the play of light. I kissed her cheek. Her skin was surprisingly cold for mid-June. She didn't move a muscle. She didn't laugh at my joke or react to my kiss. Although she did react at when I turned on the light. I'm not sure what that reaction was, but it certainly wasn't the reaction of someone who had lived a whole life, understanding what happens when a light switch is flicked. I didn't have anything planned, I said, answering her initial question. I guess I just went to bed early. I didn't think it would take this long to forget your promise, she exhaled. I stopped there. A promise? What promise? Then I remembered. I made a promise that night, didn't I? Oh yes, the old rash thing. I somehow forgot, sorry. Can we start next month? A blank expression returned. She had this impassive expression on her face, reminiscent of the mannequin face that had shocked me when we had that awkward conversation. It left me feeling cold and confused, and I'll never forget it. Despite her blank expression, I knew the answer to my question was no. Look, why do I even have to go? Was the question I should have asked on my wedding night. Get out, she growled. What? Get the fuck out, she barks. Now. The only time I've ever heard my wife yell was in court during her trial arguments, and even then it was a firm, authoritative voice, not a yell. Sure, she raised her voice, but that was nothing compared to the volume she had reached now. Her voice was full of anger as she screamed at me like a banshee. Over and over again, the same demand flew from her lips. Get out! I couldn't help but back away, but she approached with the ferocity of a king cobra. Fearing the neighbors would hear and call the police, I raised my hands in surrender, grabbed my keys off the counter, and sprinted out of the house. Looking back, I realized that the best thing that could have happened in this whole situation was our neighbors going to the police if they weren't already in our basement. I spent the night in my car in the 24-hour Walmart parking lot. I couldn't sleep after the argument. What happened to the beautiful day we had just spent? I couldn't get the scene out of my head. Sophia was shaking with contempt, and her normally hazy grey eyes turned space grey with every syllable she threw at me. My wife wasn't like that. The one who had just kicked me out of the house was not my wife. After spending so much time with my wife, I finally realized one of the clear signs that she is lying to you. It's very natural for her as a lawyer. It's just one of her many talents, so I don't blame her for it. We were fine as long as she wasn't telling me untruths. As you might ask, well, if she apparently lies all the time, how do you know she's not lying to you? I understand how that sounds. Her head tilt is the answer to that. I can tell she's lying every time she tilts her head. Most people won't even notice that she moves her head at all, because it's a short and insignificant movement. It was funny to watch her make up little innocent lies to the cashier about not knowing the expiration date on coupons, or to her parents about being busy the day they wanted to go out to dinner. Sometimes she would tell a small, harmless lie, and each time a tilt of the head was the prelude to that lie. I felt like I was the only one who knew about it. She has somehow managed to hide it from her parents, friends and co-workers. I witnessed her lies in court, and things stopped being so innocent and harmless. A man's life was indeed on the line. If he lost this defense, he faced the death penalty. Unexpected evidence. The idea of admissible evidence that was not mentioned during discovery was ridiculed by the defense attorney. The judge allowed it because of its relevance to the case. Even as a bailiff, I realized this was a very lucky and risky move based on the mood of the judge. When were you confronted with this evidence? And why didn't you bring them up earlier? The judge cautiously asked the prosecution. She wasn't going to make Sophia's life too easy. A slight smile appeared on my lips. Sophia thrives in situations where she's backed into a corner. I wanted to witness her escape from that situation. Her head turned slightly to the right. The smile came off my lips, and I blinked to make sure I was seeing things correctly. Her head tilted to the right, and she smiled, looking at the judge with her storm grey eyes. I was called in for an examination last night around 9 o'clock. The chief investigator who conducted the investigation returned from vacation earlier that day and went straight to work. I'm not sure how he pulled off this miracle, but I believe it only required a second pair of knowing eyes. I'm sure that was a head tilt, but what exactly was she lying about, given that she even got the head CSI to testify that her statements were true? That lefty home run made the case clear. The jury found the defendant guilty and sentenced him to death by lethal injection. I wasn't sure how, but after seeing her deceive the judge, I knew in my heart that this man was innocent. The fight we had later at our house was similar to the one that happened a few months ago when she first kicked me out of the house. Except this time, I was the one who initiated the argument. What the hell was that? I asked furiously, and rightfully so. As we enter the kitchen, she turns to face me and pulls her coat off her shoulders. You've never seen a court battle like that, have you? She winks and smiles. The defense didn't know what hit them. Well, when you blatantly lie to the judge, I don't know what to do either. The temperature dropped dramatically, and it didn't seem like it. It dropped so dramatically that my gaze shifted to the thermostat on the wall. Why the hell does this place look like a freezer when the temperature reads 70? Then I noticed the cold air coming from my wife. She was standing there looking at me with squinted eyes in her wine-colored office suit. Honestly, I prefer to see that angry look rather than the blank ones she throws at me on the third Sunday of every month. I suppress my anxiety and start again. I know what I saw. She approached me cautiously, looking at me intently with her dark eyes, and ran her fingertips along the counter. And what exactly do you think you saw, bailiff? My title came out of her mouth like spoiled food. She was luring me in. Her intention was to corner me. She wanted to know what was going on in my head so she could manipulate it and turn it against me. She would tear it to shreds the moment I showed her my hand, just like she'd done with countless other defenses. Really? You're going to use your courtroom tactics against me? I'm not some lawyer you can crush. I'm your damn husband, I barked. Fine, if you want to pretend that an innocent man isn't going to die because of the shit you did today, go ahead, but don't bring that lawyer bullshit into our house. She grinned like I was just gum on the sole of her shoe, and it was cold and unappreciative. Innocent? You don't know anything about innocent? As far as I'm concerned, you're all guilty. She left and we didn't speak for the rest of the evening. I slept on the couch, not because she made me, but because I couldn't bear to lie in bed with whatever was causing the sharp coldness emanating from her body. It was definitely not my wife. We experienced our first phase of cold reception a few weeks after our argument about her lying in court. Our house was usually a hive of laughter and happiness for the two occupants. All that was left of a healthy house was its corpse. It was always so cold, and it always came from her, no matter how high I set the thermostat. We hardly ever talked, at least not about important things. Considering I worked in the same courtroom as her, we discussed work. Only the sound of forks and knives hitting our plates could be heard. No jokes or laughter. Sometimes she would come home and go straight to bed without even eating dinner. Or she would sit in her office for hours with the door closed. I always wondered what she was doing in there. Given the pounding I heard from inside, I'd guess she was typing on the computer. If we slept in the same bed, one of us would sneak in later to avoid awkward conversations. One night she said she was on edge. She claimed that work was wearing her down and that she needed a vacation, but I assumed she meant me. I expected that this vacation would include me, but it didn't. She went on a bachelorette party in Miami. I can guarantee that I was thinking what you were thinking at that moment. I thought our marriage was over, and I was ready to get the late-night message that she had been screwed over by a stranger she met at a club. When I think about it, I want it to happen so I can get a divorce and keep my sanity. The vacation lasted a week and I was supposed to pick her up at the airport, but I slept for too long since I was so exhausted from working double time. I woke up in a dark room and, realizing I'd missed my alarm clock, I reached for my phone. Her plane landed 2 hours ago, damn it. I saw dozens of angry, understandably angry messages from her, as well as a few missed calls. How the hell could I fall asleep and forget to pick up my own wife? While I had hoped this time away from home would help, it looks like we're off to a rough start. Just as I was about to get out of bed, there was a knock on the door. My heart went into my stomach. Once again, the knocking got louder. It didn't sound like the usual house sounds. I carefully got out of bed, letting my foot gently touch the carpet so as not to disturb the wooden floor beneath. I reached into the drawer on my nightstand and squeezed the handle of my gun. Logic assured me my wife was home, but instinct told me there was something else there. The knocking wasn't on the front door, but on my bedroom door. So if she got home but lost her keys, knocking on the front door was appropriate. But who the hell is knocking on the bedroom door? I managed to reach the door and press my ear against it, listening for any breathing or movement. Nothing. Complete and utter silence. Then, out of the silence, there was another knock, which made my ear twitch from the intense vibration of the door. I quickly move away from the door. I listen again for any movement. Nothing. The breath I was holding back comes out of my lips in a trickle of smoke. I really need to check the heat. "Who's there?" I asked hoarsely. I'm not sure what I was expecting. Why would a mugger reveal his identity? I pleaded deep down inside that I was just a thief trying to make a quick score. That's what I could understand. Instead of a voice, I heard stomping feet outside the door. It was like a lot of people, or I'm not sure why my thoughts went there in the first place. Something with multiple feet was moving. "Fuck this," I muttered to myself as I grabbed the doorknob. It took me a lifetime or more to muster the courage to turn the knob. The creak of the mechanics shifting into position to allow the door to open sent shivers down my spine. If I heard it, then whoever is here with me heard it too. The corridor was empty when I opened the door. At least I assumed it was empty, but it was actually quite dark. Anything could be lurking beneath the shadows. The piercingly cold hallway cut through my sweatpants and sweater. I didn't dare enter the hall. The light switch was mounted on the wall a few feet away, but to do so required me to step through my bedroom doorway into the unknown. It meant leaving the familiar protection of my bedroom. By the time my argument with myself was over, my eyes had gotten used to the darkness. I gazed into the nothingness that had unfolded its veil to reveal its secrets to me. Someone was standing in the hallway. "Sophia?" I shuddered. I'd just said my wife's name, so you'd think I believed it was her. So why did I squeeze the gun harder? Because my head was trying to make sense of the ridiculousness that it was my wife who had just returned from the airport. But my instincts kept me chained to the bedroom floor. The figure began to turn at a slow, staggering pace. "Baby, I'm sorry." Before I could say another word, I slammed the door shut. My heart leapt out of my chest like I'd just run a marathon. That wasn't my wife. She had too many legs to be my wife. And why was her face so stretched out? So many questions were running through my head, but they were interrupted by whatever was in the hallway, pounding on the door again. This time, the pounding didn't stop, turning into a relentless pounding that threatened to kick the stupid door in. I took a step back and raised my gun to chest level at the doorway. Something was pounding their body into the door, trying to break it down. A thin, long crack appeared in the door, and the constant pounding made it threaten to widen. "Get the hell out!" More banging. Another crack. "I'm warning you." The banging was coming from everywhere now. At my closet door, at my window, even into the walls. "Stop it!" I yell, flicking the safety on my gun. "I won't ask again, damn it!" Bang, 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 bang. My finger starts to squeeze the trigger. I felt a hand on my shoulder and was about to turn around and shoot what was behind me, but a voice interrupted my hysteria. "Jack." My body stiffened, but Sophia pulled me in so I could see her face. My wife was there, and there was a frightened look on her face. Her dark forehead wrinkled and her grey eyes expressed sympathy. "Jack, baby, what's going on?" She lowered the hand that was clutching my gun. "Put the gun away." I flicked the safety switch and looked into her eyes, trying to determine if this was real or not. It couldn't be a dream. It all seemed so real. However, my wife hugged me with such strength that I couldn't help but think it was all a dream. Sophia? It wasn't a question per se, but rather my way of telling myself that she was really there, and that I wasn't some crazy monster who almost shot his own wife. A tilt of the head. Just a little bit. Yes, it's me, baby, she assures me, pulling me toward the bed. Come back to bed. Going to bed, I couldn't help but notice the spider web of cracks on the door. The number of missing persons in my hometown is almost twice as high as the national average. Here people disappear as if it were an Olympic sport. For comparison, my town has 20,000 residents, give or take, and there were 28 missing residents last year alone. It might not seem like much at first, but in the 5 years prior to that, there were 91 missing persons. Nearly 1% of the population has vanished. That does not include the persons who went missing and were found, or those whose skeletons were discovered instead. That would raise our percentage to almost 3%. The highest number of missing persons we have ever had in a single year is 66. To be fair, that occurred during the founding year of our town, which was previously a mining town. Therefore, local historians attribute that number to a mine collapse. Even though I'm not very interested in history, particularly as it relates to my town, I can assure you that no mine collapse has ever been mentioned in our history books. The point is that my neighbors recently raised the missing person status to 31 in October. When exactly they vanished is a mystery to me. They were an old couple who didn't go out often. Their husband was bedridden, and I believe he had a home care aide. No family or friends ever paid them a visit. I can't picture being that alone during your most vulnerable time in life. The landscaper's visits to cut the lawn were the only activity I observed at their residence. I'm not sure exactly when they vanished. Might have been a week or months ago. This is essentially what I told the investigators that questioned me and my wife. It was a firm belief of the detectives that the couple departed during the final 2 weeks of September, which I found unusual because they can't just get up and leave, especially without their vehicle. The wife uses a walker, and I'm not even sure if the guy can walk. They weren't getting any place very quickly. The stranger thing is that the healthcare worker also vanished. 3 individuals simply disappeared. One of the beat cops suggested the woods, but was soon silenced by the higher-ranking officers. All the terrifying stories in the area come from the woods. Something in the woods is blamed for all the missing persons. Of course, no one has ever seen this enigmatic creature. Following last year's occurrence, I started believing these accounts. A woman was discovered chained and gagged in the woods, with these strange brands on various portions of her body. The fate of the man she was discovered with was much more gruesome. Only half of him was discovered nearby. I'm not talking about a cut across the middle. Think of his entire body as a complete Kit Kat, and then think of it as just a kit. A clean cut. Something even a log cutter couldn't perform to a human body. The remaining half of his body was never located. She was unable to speak when the police tried to persuade her to testify about what had transpired. The woman's vocal cords had been replaced with yes, the stuff horses eat, according to a medical assessment. Regardless, the woman didn't last a week. She was spotted hanging from a tree branch not far from her initial location. Her escape from the round-the-clock guard rotation is a mystery. According to the autopsy, one half of her body was swapped out for the other half of the dead man that the police initially discovered. According to the testimony of the physician who performed her initial and follow-up examinations, the woman showed no indications of having any alien attachments prior to her recent discovery. Anyone shouting gibberish about creatures in the woods never really caught my attention. It would be nice if we could accept that not all evildoers are demons. I have no explanation for the disappearances or the things that occurred in the woods last year, but I am positive it isn't a murderous clown. On the other hand, my wife will listen to all of this nonsense. It didn't matter if you were a homeless person or a child. If you had something to say about missing persons or the woods, she would listen closely. I was not being totally truthful when I informed the police that I knew nothing about my neighbour's disappearance. However, sharing this narrative would make me appear insane then, especially in front of my wife. My sanity is my last line of defence against her. If I lose it, it's game over. Read this and you'll understand. We were doing our weekly grocery run, something we do every weekend. Weekends were one request we made of our work. As a prosecutor, Sophia isn't always assured of that. Working in a courthouse gave me the benefit of always having Saturdays and Sundays. We are fortunate to have this weekend to spend time together. After a vacation to Miami, our relationship took off, and we immediately returned to savouring every moment together. I quickly wheeled the cart around the supermarket, looking for my wife. If we were to go home and cook dinner in time for our show, Jersey Shore, we'd have to leave right away. That woman can teleport, I swear. It's amazing how she can vanish from view the moment she's out of your line of sight. At last, I located her by the deli area, hunched over at the waist, conversing with a young blonde female. I rolled my eyes at the story she told my wife. Something about an imposing faceless woman with hair similar to my wife's enticing her into the woods. I'm not sure why my wife entertained this nonsense. For someone who only deals in facts, she really enjoys her superstition. As the young girl recounted what I assumed was some sort of nightmare, my wife remained motionless. She didn't even appear to be breathing. Her expression, which was blank and mannequin-like, is what tensed me up. "Are you who I saw in the woods?" the girl whispers from behind her hands. "Maybe." My wife grins. "What's going to happen to me if I go into the woods?" "The same thing that will happen to Mr. and Mrs. Bennett, our neighbours." "What happened to them?" My wife arose to her full stature. "We can show you," she finishes with a smile. "We won't be doing anything because we are not in the business of scaring pretty little girls like yourself," I interject, ruffling the girl's hair. I shoot my wife a look, but she was still staring blankly at the girl. "Run off to Mama now." I grin and wave at the girl, who rushes into the arms of her equally blonde mother. I turn back to my wife, my expression displaying annoyance. "Let's leave the scare tactics for the defense, prosecutor," I beseeched. We hurried home from the grocery shop and prepared dinner, in time to watch the last of Jersey Shore. Even yet, the show and dinner weren't as relaxed as they usually were. Even though my lovely wife was cuddled up in my arms, my thoughts were elsewhere. The seemingly innocuous reference to our neighbours. Why did she talk to that child in such a serious manner? I did not notice a single head tilt. Whatever. Given that it was the third Sunday of the month, I had the entire day tomorrow to think about it. I'll be out hiking with a handful of friends upstate. If she wants to have the entire house to herself, I don't care.